Before we start this video, we just wanted to take a moment to say a huge thank you for helping us hit 1,000 subscribers in just a month. Your support means the world to us, and we're so grateful to have you all on this journey. Here's to even more mysteries, stories, and milestones together. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider joining our community. We'd love to have you with us. With that being said, let's dive into today's video. Amy Velarde. When Amy Velarde entered her parents' and elderly grandmother's 3-bedroom home on November 2, 2015, she was horrified to discover blood all over the place. Amy discovered that her stepfather, Mike Scott, 58, her grandmother, Violet Taylor, 82, and Mike's mother, Barbara Scott, 80, had all been brutally murdered. But who would do such harm to the elderly? Especially because it didn't seem like anything valuable had been taken. No indication of a break-in or entry. Nothing unusual. Could it be a trusted and loved one of theirs? Together with their 2 mothers, Mike and Kathy resided in a caravan in Columbia, South Carolina. They had dated in their junior year of high school but lost touch. When they happened to cross paths again, love bloomed once again because it was meant to be. They looked out for their friends and family and were the most compassionate people one could imagine. Being outdoorsy, Kathy enjoyed being active. Violet Taylor, her mother, trusted her with all of her money, particularly after her husband went away and left her some land. Barbara Scott, Mike's mother, cared for the little ones in the nursery and was an involved member of the church. She and Violet got along great and decided to live together in harmony with their kids for the majority of their days. A single wide caravan was occupied by Kathy's daughter Amy, 30, and her fiancé Ross Velarde, on the same plot of land. Ross and Amy were also the home of Amy's son and daughter. Less than 50 yards separated the 2 houses. From clothes to doctor visits and even father-daughter dances at school, Amy's mother and stepfather raised her kids as if they were their own. As grandparents, Mike and Kathy were very active. Prior to her involvement with Ross Velarde, Amy had a history of disobedience and multiple previous husbands. It is said that Ross, who was 28 at the time, is a likable man. He was a Marine with specific combat instruction designed to protect embassies. He received benefits for his contributions. Amy's kids went to the church's 4th of July celebration in 2015, which Mike and Kathy attended. When they got home, Amy and Ross were entertaining guests and drinking. A fight broke out as Mike and Kathy attempted to remove the kids from the circumstance. Amy refused to let the grandparents see the kids ever again and held on to her kids, claiming they were hers. Since Amy and Ross were heavy Facebook users, their interactions on the platform shed light on the failing relationship between Amy and her parents. This was made clear by the numerous Facebook posts and messages that Amy, her parents, and other family members exchanged. The tense family dynamic was exacerbated by the conflicts and accusations in these communications. Amy made a public accusation of lying on July 9th, implying that it was Mike and Kathy. For the benefit of the kids, Mike's sister Pam Isabel gently pleaded with Amy the following day to cease exposing their private arguments on the internet. In a furious reply, Amy vowed never to allow Mike to again be her children's grandfather. By July 16th, Mike and Kathy made an effort to make amends with Amy by expressing regret and sending well wishes. Even yet, Amy continued to tweet about emotional abuse and to share videos of her disputes with her family, which fueled their ongoing feud. Despite their bond with her children, a neighbor claimed that Amy was generally hostile and disrespectful towards her parents, yelling at them and wishing they were dead. Because of their strained relationship, Amy did not invite her mother Kathy to the wedding on October 24th when she married Ross. Mike knocked on Ross and Amy's door the week after Ross and Amy were married. He expressed his regret to Amy and said that Kathy and Violet were suffering much from not being able to see the grandchildren. After her apology, Amy started going back to Mike and Kathy's residence. She assured them they would be able to see the kids the next weekend when they picked them up from Ross's parents' place. Amy's kids were at Ross's parents' house out of town the weekend of the tragedy. Amy became worried as soon as she hadn't seen her family in a few days. Amy checked on them on November 2nd, 2015. She heard the television on even though the lights were out. When she turned on the lights, she saw nothing but terror. At 12:30 p.m., she immediately called 911 and requested that they visit their Pendleton house on Refuge Road. By the time the officers arrived on the scene, it was really bloody. At first, all they could see on the faces of the victims were bullet holes caused by gunshot wounds. However, they soon discovered that a full cut had been made across their throats. The fact that the criminal changed weapons made it a special kind of crime. It looked like the victims had been shot after being stabbed. There was no indication of forced entrance, but there was indications of a fierce struggle. At the time, investigators thought that the victim's killer had been allowed entry into the residence. The main bedroom wardrobe had a shelf tilted forward, which led investigators to believe that something heavy had been taken out of it. It was theorized that money had been taken from a safe. The fact that Mike Scott stored cash in the residence was known to a few people. This was widely known. Amy was viewed as the mourning relative until the officers searched her caravan and found $67,000 in cash. Mike Scott stored his money in an envelope, labeled with the denominations. It did not appear likely that the couple's assertion that the money was savings plus profits from their dog grooming business was true. Near the entryway, the investigators discovered an unopened bucket of Halloween candy. From there, the police deduced that the family had most likely been killed on October 31st. After months of being kept apart, Mike and Kathy appear to be anticipating a visit from Amy's children, as evidenced by the toys on the table in the living room. The grandparents seemed to be anticipating the children's visit, but Amy and Ross were close by in their caravan with her out-of-town kids. Why? Every victim had defensive wounds on their hands, indicating that they had retaliated against their assailant. Mike may have bled to death in the living room because he was discovered face down in a sizable blood pool. His left side of his neck had 6 huge incisions on it, all caused by a long knife blade. He also received a bullet wound to the back of his left ear. The 2 elderly women, Barbara Scott on the inside and Violet Taylor on the exterior, lay side by side in the living room. Violet's neck was nearly entirely slashed in a near-decapitation incident. She also had defensive wounds on her left hand and 2 gunshot wounds to her head, which shows how resilient she was. With about 6 stab wounds to her neck, chest, and left shoulder in addition to a close-range gunshot wound behind her right ear, Barbara Scott was the most injured of all. Given their age and fragility, the extent of Barbara and Violet's knife wounds was especially upsetting. Kathy Scott was discovered in the bedroom, suffering from severe internal bleeding after being stabbed in the right lung through a major blood vessel. The injury measured 9¼ inches in depth, and the rectangular bruise matched that of a battle knife with a guard or hilt. She was also wounded by 2 gunshots. She also seems to have been going for a gun when she tripped over a cushion and a backpack. What happened was explained by the place where she was discovered. There were footprints on the carpet leading up to the hallway. She was probably stabbed, and after running to the bedroom, she was shot. Given the variety of killing techniques and the footprints discovered at the murder site, police had enough grounds to suspect that there were at least 2 attackers. Another intriguing detail was that Mike Scott had sent his pal a picture of cash, showcasing his housing savings. There was a missing sum of money. The date on this photo was October 29th. The cash in the picture matched the serial numbers of the cash that was later discovered in Amy and Ross's caravan, further linking them to the crime. Amy was acting strangely at the funeral. She had a chilly demeanor and was wearing red, while everyone else was crying and sad. Amy gave Violet's niece a stern remark when she came to pay her respects. "It was not me." She demolished every piece of evidence, even the bloodied carpeting, as soon as the funeral was over. However, the couple only came under investigation in 2018, 3 years later. Amy moved to reclaim all of the evidence that was taken from the residence. This includes money as well as cars and weapons. That's when the investigators started to notice her. Her spending was even more suspect than her behavior. The police had to review the couple's financial records in order to gather circumstantial evidence. The majority of the funds came from a $25,000 disability check that Ross received after being released from the Marines in 2013. They had Styles for Miles, a $5,000 income tax refund, and $17,000 from their dog grooming company. Ross purchased a $14,000 pickup and a $58,100 Mustang in 2013. For a grand total of $35,000, he also paid $15,000 for 2 Harley Davidsons. But he only received a $25,000 disability payout, leaving a $10,000 shortfall. There were notes suggesting that, with only $40 in their company account, the couple struggled to pay their rent in 2015. It was then mentioned that on November 1, 2015, they were required to pay $7,000. It was surprising that just a few days after their home catastrophe, they had the money. Styles for Miles, their company, brought around $27,100 in 2014 and about $27,000 in 2015. Even with these gains, their expenditures greatly outpaced their actual revenue. Amy's cousin Hannah Taylor, who used to work for the Pendleton Company, revealed that the couple had been having money problems. Hannah said that it was so awful that her paychecks were consistently insufficient. There were bill collectors calling and leaving voicemails like you wouldn't believe every morning when I arrived and checked the voicemails and phone calls. Just a month or two prior to the killings, Hannah addressed Styles for Miles about not getting paid for her services and was subsequently sacked. She also said that she noticed a big military-style knife in Amy's car, which raised questions because it was thought that a military-style knife was used by the person who killed the victims. "Please, honey, don't spend any more money," Ross texted his wife on September 4, 2015. The amount remaining in the business account is just $40. Amy texted Ross on October 15, 2015, saying that people were arguing about the rent at the shop. In response, Ross asked, "Baby, what do you want me to say to them? We really don't have the funds right now." According to Roxy Voorhees, a different employee of Styles for Miles, Amy made the decisions regarding her connection with Ross. Because of Kathy's decision to remove her biological father from life support after his horrific automobile accident, Amy harbored a deep-seated animosity for her mother. It looked like the couple's phones rang close to their house on Halloween night as they looked through cell phone data. The fact that Ross's red Asics shoes, which were captured on camera, matched the shoe prints discovered at the scene was another crucial piece of evidence. That specific hoodie and the sneakers Ross was wearing were never found. There's more. The couple's account of going out and then retiring to bed at 9 was not supported by the texts. They were spotted at a store after 9:38 p.m., and text messages put them in the area at 8:36 p.m. Amy refused to participate when the detectives wanted to interrogate each of them separately. Ross forgot that he and Amy had informed the police that evening that they would be in bed by 9. Given the discrepancies in the couple's accounts, it was clear that they were lying. Investigators thought they had enough evidence after going through financial and cell phone records, shoe prints at the crime scene, contradictory statements, their erratic relationships with the victims, and some of Mike's cash found in the Velarde trailer. It took more than 8 years after the horrific events of Halloween 2015 for Amy and Ross Velarde to be apprehended in December of 2023. They were detained pending trial after their bond application was turned down on February 16, 2024. Amy Velarde is the only person who would actually gain from their death, according to prosecutor Heather Weiss. Amy relocated her family into the house and promptly cleaned up the murder scene, according to her. What Amy did with the money she inherited is unknown to the investigators. Pam Isabella, the sister of Mike Scott, is appreciative that she is now receiving justice after suffering the horrific deaths of her mother and brother. The murderous couple, Amy and Ross, allowed their avarice and animosity to make them blind. Their family was very caring and understanding, allowing them to live rent-free and providing for them in every way. Everything was lost for them. Love, security, kinship, and even cash were what they desired. Maybe everything would have worked out okay if they had carried on with their lives. And they nearly got away with it, not realizing that eventually the truth comes to light. If you're fascinated by true crime and enjoying the video so far, Make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up to stay updated on all our latest content. Moving on to the next case. Bella. A plastic bag was discovered by a woman strolling her dog on the shoreline of Deer Island, which is close to Boston, Massachusetts, on June 25, 2015. She wrote it off as discarded rubbish, but her dog kept asking to investigate, and she eventually found the child's lifeless body, a horrifying find. She alerted the authorities right away, shocked and terrified. The infant doe's identity remained elusive despite the authorities' best attempts because of its extreme state of decomposition. But it took 3 months to find the child. Who in their right mind would commit such a crime? Anyway, as soon as the child's body was discovered on Deer Island, an inquiry into her death was launched. The child's identity was determined by officials through extensive decomposition. She was found carrying a zebra print blanket inside the bag and wearing only a pair of white leggings with a black polka dot pattern. The initial lack of clarity resulted in futile efforts to find any more bodies or remains using cadaver dogs. The body had already started to decompose, making it impossible to identify by sight, and prolonged contact to water made it impossible to gather fingerprints. It was impossible for investigators to identify the child's race or ethnicity. How her remains got to that spot remained a mystery. It was unclear if the body had been dumped on the beach or had sank in the water from somewhere else, possibly Canada. The body was not sufficiently decomposed, leading authorities to suspect that the victim had been brought to the area instead of washing ashore from another location. On July 3, 2015, the child's body was found, and an autopsy was performed. However, the results did not reveal the cause of death. Despite their suspicions of foul play, the remains showed no traces of visible injuries. Tests were then carried out to look for any evidence of alcohol, drugs, or poisons that might have contributed to the death. Eventually, it was discovered that the infant had Hispanic ancestry. Her hair was described as 14 inches long, wavy, and brown, indicating that it had not been clipped in a time. She weighed about 30 pounds and was reported to be between 3 feet 1 and 3 feet 6 inches tall. There were no noticeable scars or birthmarks on her body. Her clothes, believed to be a size 4T, were found to have been made by the Serco company and may have been purchased at Target. The blanket, on the other hand, appeared to have come from Cannon Mills and may have been purchased at Kmart. An elastic hairband was also found to be present. She may not have been identified, but she seems to have had good care throughout her life, with no evidence of starvation. After attempts to identify the child's body failed, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children digitally recreated the child's face to help with identification. Using stock and morgue photos, Adobe Photoshop was used to build the reconstruction, which approximated her appearance in her prime. To get further details, flyers with pictures of the youngster and her possessions were circulated. On July 4, 2015, the child's information was added to the National Missing and Unidentified Person System, NAMUS, along with information on her discovery and physical estimates. Despite the exclusion of almost 200 missing people from the investigation, no matches were found. Nobody stepped forward to identify the victim or take credit for the crime, despite tremendous attempts. Forensic testing was now a major component of the Deer Island baby doe case inquiry. DNA samples from the body's teeth and hair were collected, but they did not match any profiles that were kept in databases of people who were known to be missing. The University of North Texas received additional samples for more detailed characterization. It took a while to conclude, but it was possible that she had also visited any of the 6 New England states, if not more. She could have traveled across the nation, according to the results of the hair and enamel test. In an interview, television host John Walsh offered his perspective into the matter and urged people who knew anything to come forward. Authorities got a lot of tips, but many leads produced little or no results. People may anonymously submit information by calling or texting a 24-hour hotline, and as a result, submissions were received from all around the United States and abroad. Following a grueling 3 months of searching nonstop, Bella Nevaeh Amoroso Bond was finally recognized as the child on September 18, 2015. On August 6, 2012, Joe Amoroso and Rochelle Bond welcomed her into the world. After Rochelle Bond's neighbor discovered a connection between Bella and the infant doe, Bella was recognized. Concerned about Bella's prolonged absence from the home, Laura Sprinsky, the sister of Rochelle's neighbor Michael Sprinsky, questioned Rochelle and her boyfriend Michael McCarthy, who stated Bella had been taken away by the Department of Children and Families. This was eventually proven false, though, since the neighbor's sister reported the incident to the police, believing baby doe to be Bella. A search warrant was carried out at Rochelle Bond's Dorchester, Massachusetts, house on September 17, 2015. Although he had never met her, Bella's biological father, Joe Amoroso, had chatted with her over the phone. Amoroso expressed shock that Rochelle could have been involved and conjectured that her lover might have used heroin to sedate her. But Bella's paternal grandma doubted Rochelle's sincerity and thought Rochelle had a significant role in Bella's demise. Detectives had to delve deeply into Rochelle and Michael's background, all the way back to November 2011, when Bella was conceived, in order to learn more about what had transpired. Rochelle, her mother, was enmeshed in a heroin addiction. Her involvement in the local drug culture was significant, and she turned to illicit means of financing her addiction. Despite everything, Joe Amoroso, Rochelle's partner, was also disloyal. He never saw his daughter Bella and vanished before Bella was born. Indecent. He never saw his daughter Bella and vanished before Bella was born. Rochelle was determined to keep Bella, even though she had previously lost custody of her other children as a result of her addiction. Bella was born in Boston Medical Center on August 6, 2012. Rochelle was determined to be a responsible mother after meeting her daughter for the first time, but allegations of mistreatment persisted. She tried to provide Bella a stable atmosphere and managed to get an apartment in neighboring Dorchester. Even though Rochelle loved Bella, she battled addiction, and she periodically fell back into old habits. The reports of recklessness persisted, which was understandable given Rochelle's continuous struggle with heroin use and how it affected her capacity to look after Bella. Concerns over the household situation led the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families to approach Rochelle in 2012 and 2013. As the months went by, feeling the hardship of being a single mother, Rochelle continued to communicate with Joe by phone. He kept in touch with the family, but he never went back to meet Bella in person. Rochelle, in the meantime, started seeing Michael McCarthy in January 2015 because she desired a companion. Everything appeared regular at first, but Michael's behavior gradually became unpredictable. He lived with Rochelle and Bella and was fascinated with occult subjects. Their relationship rapidly deteriorated as they both became drug addicts. Police reports on the abuses were not followed up on, hence the problem continued. Rochelle was lying to them, which is why no one noticed Bella's absence. She made up the story that Bella had been removed from their home by the Department of Children and Families, saying that the circumstances were too difficult. In the light of the situation, nobody questioned Rochelle's account. Given their high level of suspicion and Rochelle's repeated lies about the child's DCF, the investigators got a search warrant and spoke with Michael and Rochelle. Rochelle was eventually taken over. Rochelle tried to see if Bella was possessed after she passed out. Rochelle tried CPR on Bella after she passed out, but Michael intimidated her and dumped the body at the harbor. Investigators who had long suspected foul activity in Bella's case had their suspicions validated, but Rochelle's participation cast doubt on her competence. There were also inconsistencies that raised questions about Bella's level of engagement and motivations, such as her status as alive on a benefits form. Thus, on September 18, 2015, Michelle and Michael were taken into custody. According to medical findings, Bella's significant abdominal injuries may have contributed to her death. The chief medical examiner, Dr. Henry M. Nields, suggested that the trauma may have caused asphyxiation or cardiac arrest. In spite of these conclusions, Michael claimed upon his arrest that he was unaware of Bella's passing. Both Michael McCarthy and Rochelle Bond gave different accounts of what happened during their respective trials in June 2017. Rochelle was portrayed by Michael as a drug-addled, careless mother in an effort to place the responsibility elsewhere. Rochelle, meantime, insisted she was innocent of the crime but acknowledged that she assisted in disposing of the body while under Michael's influence. Charges for welfare fraud were also brought against her, and she kept on receiving Bella's benefits long after her death. Rochelle was charged with significant crimes, even though the judge seemed to believe her story during her trial. With cadaver dogs proving that there was a body in the McCarthy home and bruises on the body supporting Rochelle's story, the case against Michael appeared to be stronger. But there was no concrete proof connecting Michael to Bella's demise. As Rochelle had supposedly informed him that Bella had been taken away by the state's child welfare department, Michael's defense claimed he was unaware that Bella had gone missing. The trials exposed Bella's family's intricate network of abuse, addiction, and deceit. In the meantime, Michael Spritsky's position as a crucial witness highlights the psychological cost of pursuing Bella's justice. Following Bella Bond's untimely demise, Michael McCarthy was found guilty of second-degree murder on June 28, 2017, and given a life sentence with the chance of release after 20 years. After accepting a guilty plea, Rochelle was given a probationary period that was significantly shortened. But there were concerns about how the Department of Children and Families handled Bella's case, and further research exposed grave misbehavior. Before McCarthy was sentenced, Bella's biological father, Joe Amoroso, gave a victim impact statement in which he expressed his deep sorrow over the death of his daughter. Even though Joe had never met Bella, he underlined how important her existence was and bemoaned not being able to be her father. Aside from this, the Office of the Child Advocate's research uncovered grave mistakes in the child welfare system. The employee who engaged in the misbehavior was merely given a formal written warning by the organization. Balobin's case generated a great deal of national attention and discussion on Facebook and Twitter. Many people offered to pay for the funeral and interment, and the funeral home promised to provide the means for a dignified burial with a headstone. Joe Amoroso disclosed that Bella would be buried in Winthrop, Massachusetts, surrounded by family, with wake and public funeral ceremonies chosen. But on November 28, 2015, Bella was ultimately buried in a private ceremony at Winthrop Cemetery. She was interred beneath a gravestone that included her name and the date of her finding after both of her parents ultimately decided not to disclose the event to the public. Later, Bella's mother's Facebook page posted pictures of her. By the time we finish Bella's story, it's obvious that her parents' negligence caused her untimely demise. The horrific deeds committed by Michael McCarthy and Rochelle Bond, both inside and outside of prison, are brought to light by Bella's story, which emphasizes the necessity of improving child protection. Moving on to the next case. Nellie Hicks. The 59-year-old mother of 6 children was Nellie Hicks. She worked as a 4th-grade teacher at San Lorenzo, California's Ashland School. Nellie was at home in Newark, California, on May 10, 1972. She shared a home with her lifelong buddy as well as her grown son and his spouse. About 1 in the morning that fateful morning, Nellie and her friend, who is also a teacher, had a brief conversation. She was asleep on a sofa in the living room. She was last observed alive at that point. Nellie's son found her dead body in the same room around 4 hours later. There was no sign of her wallet. Later on, it was discovered a few blocks away, close to some pants that had blood on it. As the murders took place, the other residents were all fast sleeping. This made the police believe that the intruder had first rendered her unconscious before attacking her. Police discovered that she had been beaten and battered with a brick wrapped in pantyhose after noticing that she was only partially clothed. The power of the strikes ripped her head open, revealing the horror right away. The culprit slashed her dress and bra with manicure scissors after breaking through an unsecured sliding glass door. Everyone who knew Nellie could not have imagined that someone would have a reason to end her life because she was a well-liked and respected instructor. He and the other men she dated were questioned 10 years prior to her leaving an abusive husband, but this did not result in the identification of a potential suspect. Although fingerprints were found, they were never connected to a particular individual. DNA was taken during the autopsy. Nevertheless, despite decades of investigation, the case was never solved since DNA testing was not available at the time. There would soon be another horrific crime committed nearby. Teresa Pica, a 48-year-old resident of Hayward, California, lived on Edlow Drive. One of Teresa's twin 10-year-old children found her face down and hunched over the couch on May 15, 1979. Her 3 kids had last seen her alive the previous evening. She had taken off her nightgown, revealing her legs. A rope was fastened behind her back to restrain her hands. Beside her lay a blood-stained rock and a shirt that had been used to choke her. A window in the front room had been forced open. The neighbor who heard rustling close to the house in the middle of the night provided the lone eyewitness story of an intruder. Teresa had lost her handbag. Later on, her wallet and other belongings were found in a trash can down the street and in the yard of a neighbor. Similar to Nellie's case, DNA was gathered, but testing equipment was non-existent. In the decades that followed, several people were looked into, but no suspects came to light. In 2 remarkably identical situations, family members uncovered the remains of their loved ones after they had been beaten and raped when they got up in the morning. They had been sleeping in their living rooms when a stealthy invader had crept into their houses and attacked them. The culprit, Fred Bernard Farnham, was identified in 2023 by detectives from the Hayward and Newark police departments. The killings of Teresa Pica in Hayward in 1979 and Nellie and Hicks in Newark in 1972 were both committed by Farnham, according to statements made by the police in Hayward and Newark in December 2023. Unfortunately, Farnham died in a hospital in Oregon in 2007 at the age of 73. After growing up in California's Central Valley, he relocated to the South Bay in the 1950s. He was found guilty there of several attacks committed in the 1970s. Nothing suggests he ever called the East Bay home. He also resided in Oregon, where he passed away in the town of Cape Junction, as well as Nevada, Idaho, North Dakota, Alaska, and Oregon. In 2021, the exhumation of the remains of a suspected suspect was carried out using the same procedure that was used to find Farnham. By comparing its DNA to the evidence from the crime site, it was later ruled out. However, according to the police, that man was on the same genealogical tree. 9-year-old David Hicks, one of Nellie's 3 surviving children, expressed gratitude to the authorities for their persistent efforts to bring the 52-year-old cold case to a conclusion. 3 months before the police cracked Nellie's cold case, her son Ron, who had discovered her body, had died. David referred to his mother as a hero for raising a family of 6 while holding a full-time teaching position. I am so appreciative of the police officers and their commitment to this issue. They all put up a great deal of effort to provide our family with closure. Similar to how Teresa's daughters expressed relief at the closure brought about by Farnham's identification, their statement was read aloud during the press conference. The statement says that our mother can now sleep in peace. We now acknowledge that the person responsible for this will never face consequences. However, we give thanks to God for your perseverance and effort. We can now go on and put this difficult period of our life behind us. While learning the suspect's identity after all these years was a positive development, Jan Whalen, 62, Teresa's daughter, told the San Francisco Chronicle that it also set off everything all over again. I blamed myself for not being able to halt what happened for the majority of my life. It still stings even though I was eventually able to tell myself a few years ago that there was nothing I could do. This will now enable me to find closure. Following Teresa's murder, Newark and Hayward police connected the crimes due to a recognizable behavioral pattern that the 2 instances shared, according to Newark Police Captain Jolene Macias. That one instance will solve the other was fueled by this assumption. She also made it a point to echo the feelings expressed by the victim survivors, stating that today is really about these families and how resilient they have been over the past 50 years. 45 years is a long time, Hayward Police Chief Brian Matthews stated during the press conference. For several generations of investigators, it has been a long time. Authorities believe Farnham may have been involved. Authorities believe Farnham may have been connected to other incidents as well, and they have notified law enforcement to investigate their other unsolved cases for potential links. Pamela Shelley. In January of 2001, a horrible phone call was placed to 911 operators. The caller had called to let them know that Pamela Shelley, a young mother, had shot and killed herself. The forensic pathologist concluded that Pamela Shelley committed suicide after the autopsy, but the police and Pamela's family didn't think the results were real. After years of doubting Pamela's apparent death, the case fell cold, but one determined detective made it her mission to follow up on it. The case was revisited with a little help from a TV show about genuine crimes. The small Texas hamlet of Cuero, where today's case is set, was rocked by Pamela Shelley's passing. On July 25, 1969, Pamela Jean Shelley was born in Houston, Texas. However, Ashdown, Arkansas, where she was raised, was a small town with 4,500 residents. Pamela is from a hardworking family. Her father drove a truck for a living, and her mother worked at a nursing home. She has a sister and a brother as well. It was said about Pamela Shelley that she was incredibly gregarious and nice to everyone in her vicinity. Pamela Shelley first met her first husband, 20-year-old Jesse Suggs, when she was 16 years old. They talked about their aspirations to get married in the future. But Pamela's dad insisted that she finish high school before doing anything else. So, as soon as she graduated from high school, she got married to Jesse. They soon became parents, welcoming their first daughter, Kayla, into the world. After only 4 years of marriage, Pamela and Jesse started having issues. Jesse used drugs to get high on a regular basis, and ultimately, he turned to criminality as a result of his drug abuse. Before Pamela and Jesse eventually got divorced, they had an intermittent relationship for a while. Pamela Shelley married a different man named Gary in the summer of 1991. They became parents to a child they called Dustin. After a year of marriage, she briefly moved back in with her ex-husband Jesse before settling in with her parents. A few years later, Pamela Shelley got back in touch with her childhood friend Ronnie Hendricks. They had not communicated in over 10 years, but she and Ronnie always seemed to click. Following their renewed romance, Pamela accepted Ronnie's invitation to move in with him and the kids in Cuero, Texas, when he proposed. She and her son Dustin, along with Ronnie, took an 8-hour care ride to Cuero in the summer of 2000. The daughter of Pamela, Kayla, was scheduled to arrive a few months later. Ronnie Hendricks lived in Cuero, Texas, with his family. Everything was good between them, according to Deborah, Ronnie's mother, until Kayla moved in. She claimed that because her son Ronnie would always push her to help around the house, Kayla changed the entire dynamic in the home and caused them to argue regularly. Kayla also insisted on going back to Arkansas with her mother and herself so she could be with her father, according to Deborah and Ronnie. Ronnie and Pamela started to argue almost every day until the terrible events of January 6, 2001. On January 6, 2001, Ronnie Hendricks stated he heard a gunshot coming from inside their house while standing on their porch. He didn't take long to contact 911 at precisely 5 o'clock. At that point, the DeWitt County Police showed up. Pamela Shelley was unconscious on the bathroom floor when the police and EMTs arrived inside. There was blood all over, the gun was on the counter, and she had been shot in the right temple. The EMTs told Ronnie Hendrick that it would take them an hour to get to the nearest hospital. Ronnie said he knew a quicker way to get there by taking the back roads, and he vowed to go with them. Although Pamela was not well, she was still alive. But on January 7th, the doctors pronounced her brain dead despite having her on life support. When Pamela's ex-husband Jesse showed up at the hospital, he took the children and brought them back to Arkansas. On January 8, 2001, the medical examiner concluded that Pamela had committed suicide. It was determined that the gunshot wound was self-inflicted because it made extremely close contact with the flesh. But the suicide scenario was rejected by Sheriff Carl Bowen, who took over the case. Jesse Suggs admitted to Sheriff Bowen that he struggled to get his act together, which was the reason their relationship was difficult. Jesse replied that he had shared a bed with Pamela the night before she left for Texas when asked when he had last seen her. He went on to say that he had traveled to Texas in order to return his children to Arkansas, and that Pamela had planned to return with them on January 6th. Jesse knew that Kayla, Pamela, and Ronnie were often having problems. Jesse consented to undergo a polygraph as part of the investigation, which he passed. Jesse was ruled out as a suspect because Pamela Shelley was shot at his mother's house in Arkansas, 800 miles away. Ronnie Hendrick was the second individual the detective spoke with. He reported to the police that he heard what sounded like a gunshot while standing outdoors on the porch. Then he stormed inside and saw Pamela bleeding profusely from a head wound as she lay on the floor. He asserted that he had shielded Kayla, age 12, and Dustin, age 9, from the graphic scene. Ronnie added that Pamela and the children had started packing that morning in preparation for their trip back to Arkansas. He said Pamela Shelley had been depressed about returning to Arkansas. Nevertheless, family issues forced the move, especially given the tension between him and Kayla. Pamela didn't want to go back, but Ronnie told the police she had no choice since she was scared of losing her kids. The detectives were troubled by the discrepancies in the case, notwithstanding the autopsy results. They questioned why, if Pamela Shelley intended to commit suicide, she would have crammed her entire possessions into a car. Furthermore, the portrayal of a suicidal young woman by Ronnie Hendricks didn't match the information that the authorities had about Pamela Shelley. Former DeWitt County Sheriff's Office Deputy Sheriff Carl Bowen speculates that Pamela Shelley's death might have been the consequence of a homicide or accident. Ronnie Hendrick consented to take a polygraph exam when asked by officials to obtain more information, but he missed 3 scheduled dates. He either rescheduled or didn't show up at all before going entirely missing. The medical examiner concluded the inquiry and declared suicide to be the cause of death, closing the case. Sheriff Carl Bowen, however, chose to re-examine the case 7 years after Pamela Shelley had away since he had never thought it was a suicide. Still, Pamela's medical records were collected by Sheriff Carl Bowen so that they could be properly and thoroughly examined. It was found that Pamela Shelley was taking low-grade antidepressants to treat her frequent stress-induced seizures. Killers spoke with Sheriff Bowen and admitted that, on January 4th, 2 days before her mother's discovery, Ronnie had attacked her. When Kayla protected her mother from Ronnie, she claims that he attacked her and severely darkened her eyes. They went to a hospital thereafter. Pamela made the decision to tell the doctors that she had fallen into a coffee table with the help of the kids. Since the kids really wanted to return to Arkansas on January 6th, Pamela decided to do so following the incident. Following this discovery, in 2008, Ronnie Hendrick was located at the county jail by Sheriff Carl Bowen. Ronnie struck his girlfriend, resulting in his arrest. Then, he was questioned again about what had happened on January 6, 2001. His stories had discrepancies that the police discovered. In addition, he had to undergo a polygraph examination, which exposed his deceit. Although the detectives had suspicions about something, they lacked sufficient proof to hold Ronnie accountable for Pamela's death. But the case remained unsolved for another 4 years, until 2012, when Pamela Shelley's case was picked up by a TV program that looked at cold cases. They tried to look for fingerprints and DNA on the gun. The results were shocking when they were revealed. The gun belonged to Ronnie, but neither Ronnie's nor Pamela's DNA was discovered on it. The police and TV show now believe that all traces of DNA had been removed from the handgun. Sheriff Carl Bowen was now receiving assurances that Pamela had not committed suicide. He proceeded to speak with his mother Shirley and Pamela's ex-husband Jesse Suggs once more in August 2012. Shirley told the sheriff that she and Jesse had been using a burner phone for covert communication when Pamela was in Cairo, Texas. In response to a question about whether she thought Pamela had committed suicide, Shirley said she thought Ronnie Hendricks had shot her. Jesse Suggs claims that he spoke with Pamela over the phone about 30 minutes before her shooting death. He said he heard Ronnie come in, took the phone, and informed Jesse that Pamela would only be going home to Arkansas in a pine box. The reason was revealed, and these disclosures were starting to get disturbing. It was all the detectives needed to present their case to a grand jury. When the medical examiner discovered that Ronnie Hendricks had abused Pamela, Kayla, and other women he had dated. He quickly changed Pamela Shelley's cause of death from suicide to uncertain. 11 years have elapsed since the death of Pamela Shelley when this event occurred. Ronnie Hendrick was accused of killing Pamela Shelley in the autumn of 2012. Ultimately, Ronnie entered a guilty plea and received a 22-year prison sentence, 12 years after Pamela passed away. Terry Becker. A woman's lifeless body was discovered on December 6, 1975, in a field near 100th Avenue and Lowell Boulevard in Westminster, Colorado. 2 people on their motorcycles discovered her. She may be recognized as Terry Becker since her clothes and personal belongings were also discovered at the scene. At the time, she was 20 years old. Terry was born and raised in Casper, Wyoming, and after completing high school, relocated to the Denver metropolitan region. Friends and family recognized Terry as a free spirit. She led an adventurous life. Terry cherished both painting and music listening. Steppenwolf and Three Dog Night were 2 of her favorite bands. After an autopsy, it was determined that she had been beaten and strangled. When Terry last saw her lover at the Adams County Detention Center in Brighton, Colorado, 2 days earlier, she was hitchhiking. The primary detective on the case, Chandra Thurston, a senior criminalist with the Westminster Police Department, claimed that she had been abandoned in the field. When police arrive, an investigation is launched. Subsequently, suspects are examined over time, but nothing comes to light. The case was abandoned. A similar crime occurred in 1991. In her apartment on the 1000 block of West Monroe Avenue, close to Owens and H Street in Las Vegas, Nevada, Sherry Bridgewater was attacked and killed. The mother of 2 boys, 31 years of age, was discovered by 2 other ladies, a friend and a relative. Despite the investigating team's best efforts over the years to solve the case, it ultimately fell cold. 12 years later, in 2003, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation successfully extracted DNA from a fragment of Terry's case material. The Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, database received a sample from an unidentified individual, but no match was discovered. The Las Vegas Metro Police Department added the perpetrator's DNA to their database 10 years later, in 2013. The 2 cases were related because the sample matched Terry's offender. Both instances had no suspects prior to the DNA discovery. Technology and genetic genealogy in 2019 suggested a potential man. Veteran Thomas Martin Elliott has a long criminal past. He was given a 6-year prison term for breaking and entering into a home in Lakewood, Colorado. After being freed in 1981, he assaulted a 13-year-old girl in Carson City, Nevada, with serious intent. He was given a life sentence in prison with the possibility of release. After gaining his freedom 10 years later, he emerged as the main suspect in the unsolved Las Vegas case. On October 30th, 1991, 5 months later, he shot himself to death. He was 40 years old. Because of his brief military service, he was interred in the Southern Nevada Veterans Memorial Cemetery. Elliott was not a suspect that the Las Vegas police could look into further due to a lack of resources. After requesting aid from the Vegas Justice League, a group that has assisted the department in cracking other cold cases, in October 2023, they were able to secure funds from them, which permitted the police to exhume Elliott's remains in order to obtain a DNA sample. It was confirmed in 2024. For Terry and Sherry's instances, it was a match. The fact that Elliott was adopted by his mother's second husband presented a challenge for the identification and matching of the DNA. His real father and birth mother, Nancy West, later got divorced and remarried. Although Elliott's relationship to Terry was unknown, the investigators discovered that he and Sherry were frequent attendees of Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. Senior criminalist Chandra Thurston of the Westminster Police Department said that knowing at last that someone's name was responsible for Terry's abuse was nearly a big relief. You undoubtedly had moments during this when you thought, "I'll never be able to figure this out. We will never be able to solve this." Much relief has been felt, and I hope she understands that we did not give up on her. And we kept working until justice was served. Even if things stay this way, we still want justice for her, to know that she mattered, and to know that we have always loved her. There have been many ups and downs in this case. According to Westminster Police Commander in Investigations A.C. Stutson, many times we were so near, yet it would disappear. Terry's brother David Becker is the sole surviving family member. He stated the following and is a resident of Texas. I have no words to express how appreciative I am. I want to say how much I respect the Westminster Police Department. It is amazing that the DNA can match and provide closure after 45 years, and for that I am thankful. It is comforting to know that they are not robbing another sibling of their life. That gives me some comfort. For Westminster Police, the case represented a revolution. It was the first cold case they had solved, as well as the oldest. According to Westminster Chief Norm Hubbard, who has represented the organization for many years, the case began in 1975, and it gives the agency great satisfaction and a great feeling of success to be able to conclude it today and represent all the men and women who worked on this case. We are also relieved that we could get this resolved for the family. Regretfully, Sherry's parents died before the person who had murdered her was found. Lieutenant Johansson of the LVMPD stated that her family was able to have some closure and that the police were able to contact both of her adult sons. In order to determine whether any more incidents could be linked to the same suspect, he said that the department is going back and reviewing records. Moving on to the next case. The Cowden family. Together with their 5-year-old son David Janes and their 5-month-old daughter Melissa Dawn, Richard Cowden and his wife Belinda June shared a home. They lived in a modest, comfortable home in White City, Oregon. The family went camping at the Rogue River National Forest Campground in the isolated Siskiyou Mountains of Oregon, close to the California border, over Labor Day weekend in 1974. Their plan was to camp until Sunday, September 1st, when they would have dinner at Belinda's mother's place before returning home. The campground was roughly a mile distant from Belinda's mother's residence. Richard and David were spotted purchasing some milk at a local store in the neighboring town of Copper, Oregon, on Sunday morning at around 9 in the morning. None of the Cowden family members would ever be seen alive again after that. Belinda's mother grew anxious after spending hours waiting for her daughter and her family. Then, to find out why it was taking them so long, she made the decision to drive out to the campsite. Upon her arrival, she discovered a picnic table with a quart of milk, Melissa's nappies and Belinda's pocketbook spread out, and her family's car positioned exactly where it should have been. Overall, the campsite appeared completely unaltered, giving the impression that the family would be returning soon. She found Richard's pricey wristwatch and his wallet, which had $23, lying on the ground beside the creek as she strolled around the campsite. She waited for the family to return for approximately an hour, but they never did. After a while, she called the police. Fishing poles leaned against trees and carefully arranged, abandoned kitchen items on tree stumps were discovered by police. There was no indication that anything had been searched through or gone missing, and the car appeared undisturbed. The entire situation was unnaturally quiet, with no signs of foul play or struggle. The family's swimwear were strangely missing, as though they had all gone for a leisurely swim. Even though the wallet and pocketbook contained cash and credit cards, these were the only items that were discovered to be missing from the camp. 5 miles or so from the camp, the family dog was discovered unhurt. Despite a thorough search being conducted, the missing family was not found. At the time, many speculations were proposed as to what might have happened to them. One was that the bodies might have drowned while swimming, but there was no sign of them anywhere along the little creek. There was also the possibility that they had vanished voluntarily, but the family appeared to be content and well-adjusted, and there had been no significant deaths or enemies. Furthermore, since everything was left at the campsite, robbery could not have been the motivation. 7 months passed with no word on why they vanished. Then, in a distant forested location in April 1975, 2 hunters discovered what appeared to be human remains. When police arrived on the scene, they found the rotting bodies of 2 adults and 2 children. It was established that the remains belonged to the Cowden family. The bodies of Melissa and David Cowden were discovered crammed into a cave on a precipitous mountainside around 7 miles from their campsite. The cave had been sealed off with boulders to conceal the macabre sight inside. The cave was located just a short distance from an area that had been thoroughly examined by authorities when the people went missing. It was discovered that Belinda and David had been shot with a .22 caliber bullet, and Melissa, the young child, had suffered significant blunt head damage. Richard's body was discovered a few feet outside the cave, not within where his family had been located. Although it is believed that he was shot to death, his body was too deteriorated to determine the cause of death. Initially, it was thought that Richard Cowden had killed his family before killing himself, but a thorough search of the area produced no weapons of any kind. There would still have been a weapon if Richard had been the one to kill his family members and commit suicide. Then, rumors circulated that they had encountered some kind of foul play. One of the theories offered by the police was that they had gone swimming in the stream, been kidnapped at gunpoint, driven a short distance, pushed up the slope, and then executed by shooting. However, nobody knows for certain who or why they did it. Cowden's father was cleared later on, but suspicion was raised because he had committed suicide not long after the disappearances. Subsequently, it was believed that the murderer was a convicted rapist and murderer by the name of Dwayne Lee Little, who was out on parole in 1974 after doing time for the 1964 attack and death of a teenager. Before they vanished, it was discovered that he had been purchasing gas in the neighborhood of the Cowden campground. But there was never enough proof to establish Little's involvement in the crime. In the 1980s, Little would be apprehended and found guilty of the unrelated murder and rape of a woman. Even still, no one has been detained or accused in connection with the Cowden family massacre as of yet. Moving on to the next case. William Kennedy Smith. Patricia Bowman, a 29-year-old mother of one, was having a drink in a pub in Palm Beach, Florida on March 29, 1991, with a friend. She met 30-year-old William Kennedy Smith, and she had no idea that her life would be completely flipped upside down in a matter of hours. Smith was a Kennedy family relative and a Georgetown University medical student. He was, in particular, the nephew of the late President John F. Kennedy. That evening, Smith was drinking in the bar with Senator Ted Kennedy and his cousin Patrick. Smith asked Patricia for a ride back to the adjacent home his family owned after they first met. Patricia accepted, and the two of them started strolling along the beach. Smith inquired as to whether the 29-year-old would want to go swimming. Patricia remembered that she had felt safe up until that moment, but she was reluctant to enter the water. It would be freezing, and she couldn't swim. She also didn't want to undress in his presence. But Smith appeared to have no problem taking off his clothes in front of her. In a 1992 Vanity Fair interview, Patricia stated, "I turned my back because I didn't necessarily want to see him in his boxer shorts. I suddenly realized that it was getting late. He's heading for the pool. I ought to leave. As I made my way towards the stairs, someone grabbed my leg. I had a hard time escaping him. To the reasonable mind, that ought to be a warning. Avoid doing this. This man has suddenly grasped my leg, and he was a nice man. I'm on top of him. My body hurts from him." Patricia stated in her deposition that she had kissed Smith once that night, but that she had never once agreed to have sex. The 29-year-old contacted two of her friends to come pick her up after the claimed rape at around 4 in the morning. She was brought to their house and then dropped off at her own address when she made a call to a rape crisis center. A few hours later, Patricia went to the hospital for a rape kit examination, where doctors found sperm inside her, along with some bruises, and she complained of excruciating agony. She also reported the incident to the police. It took 9 months for Smith's trial to start. Assistant State Attorney Moira Latch of Palm Beach County led the prosecution and has an almost perfect conviction record. Despite being well known for her professional abilities, the 40-year-old's icy manner was observed to make her seem unlikable. Roy Black, also referred to as the Professor, was Smith's defense lawyer. He was notorious for taking on cases involving drug dealers and murders. About a dozen expert witnesses were called in to cast doubt on Patricia's 29-year-old account, and 5 private investigators were hired to dig into her background and the histories of her 2 friends who had picked her up from the Kennedy residence the night of the alleged assault. Notably, Moira Latch sought to remove Judge Mary Lupo from the bench before the trial, claiming that she was biased in favor of the defense. She came to this conclusion because Lash and her co-counsel frequently saw the judge frowning, glaring, and scowling at them. The journalist who attended the trial noted that Lash and Lupo clearly did not get along after the request was refused. In his Vanity Fair piece, Dominic June noted that Lash should have tried to get Lupo removed from the case because her co-counsel's husband was in a court dispute with the judge's spouse over money. Another apparent gaffe in the prosecution's strategy involved the unfavorable testimony of Patricia's friend and Mercer, who had picked her up the night of the alleged assault. Despite being one of the prosecution's most important witnesses, she was viewed as haughty and conceited, and it soon became apparent that she had accepted payment in exchange for appearing on TV. One of these was broadcast on the day the trial started. This meant that Smith's defense team could discredit her and paint her as a person who was driven solely by greed. Roy Black, Smith's lawyer, was also charged with selectively admitting jurors who supported the Kennedy family and excluding others who voiced criticism of them. When called as a witness, Senator Ted Kennedy spoke for a long time about the catastrophes that befell the family, appearing distraught even though most of what he said had nothing to do with the case. Smith allegedly shouted into the microphone, "I think this process has been unfair to him," as his uncle got off the stand. "It's not with bitterness that I say that. All I really mean is that." In an attempt to undermine Patricia, Black also asserted that she had a history of substance misuse and had had multiple abortions. In addition, he mentioned that she had an unmarried daughter. In court, Smith maintained that Patricia had given her consent for their encounter and that she had become enraged when he mispronounces her name as Kathy. Patricia refuted this. During this period, 3 more women came forward and agreed to testify that Smith had abused them between 1983 and 1988. They were a doctor, a medical student, and a law student in that order. The latter was Matthew Kennedy's cousin Smith's girlfriend. Judge Lupo, however, rejected the testimony without making any remarks. After 77 minutes of deliberation, the jury, comprised of 6 members, found Smith not guilty of any of the counts. He later graduated from medical school and became a specialist in treating landmine victims. For the most part, he avoided the spotlight. Notably, in 1995, one of the jurors was married to his defense attorney, Roy Black. A legal action was brought against Smith in 2004 by a former Center of International Rehabilitation employee who had been his assistant and claimed that he had sexually assaulted her in 1999. He dismissed the claims as baseless and refuted them. A representative for the CIR said that 2 distinct federal sexual harassment charges against Smith had been brought by former workers and had, quote, been settled amicably. The case was dismissed in January of 2005. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with us. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries. Your support helps us bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like us to cover next. See you in the next video. And remember, the search for truth never stops.